If you ever dig in your own yard and feel your shovel snag on something soft, stop, cover the dirt back up and walk away. I did not. I opened what I found, breathed in its smell, and told myself it was just trash. 3 nights later, I woke up unable to move, while an old woman sat on the edge of my bed and watched me like I was already finished. It began after a normal shift at the warehouse. I got home, ate standing up, and looked out at the back of my house with that tired annoyance you feel when chores have been waiting longer than you have. The far corner by the wall was a mess of dry leaves, loose soil, and the kind of junk you toss aside when you think you will deal with it later. I decided to deal with it. My backyard has always felt sealed off from the world. A high cinder block wall runs along the back and one side. The steel gate clicks loudly when it locks. I live alone, and that click has been my small guarantee that nobody gets in without making their presence known. I started in the back corner, pulling weeds and raking leaves into a pile. I used a shovel to level a mound of dirt that had formed near the base of the wall. On the third scoop, the shovel stopped as if it had hit a folded piece of rubber. Not rock, not root, something that gave but would not move. I crouched and dug with my hands. The topsoil was pale and dry. A few inches down, it turned darker and cool, damp enough to cling to my fingertips. The rest of the yard was dusty. I had not watered that area. The moisture felt wrong, like someone had carried it there. My nails scraped plastic. I pulled and a small wrinkled bag came up, tied in a tight knot. Dirt stuck to it inside and out. The soil above it was loose, as if it had been patted down quickly by a palm. I held it and listened for any sound from the street. There was none, and that made the quiet feel intentional. I tried to explain it. Maybe someone tossed garbage over the wall, but the wall is too high for that. And even if they did, why would it be buried? Maybe an animal dragged it in. But the knot was clean and deliberate. Hands made that knot. Curiosity put on the mask of responsibility. I told myself I needed to see what it was so I could throw it away safely. I loosened the knot. The plastic stuck and squeaked as it opened. A heavy odor pushed out at once, thick and stale, like air trapped for years in a closed room, mixed with damp earth. It grabbed the back of my throat and stayed there. A clump of long black hair slid into my palm. Too much hair to be accidental. It was tangled as if ripped out. Beneath it was dry dirt that crumbled at a touch. A folded scrap of cloth stained brown at one edge, and a red ribbon tied so tight the fibers looked strained. The smell clung to my skin. I washed and scrubbed, and it lingered anyway, as if it had moved under my pores. I shoved everything back into the small bag, sealed it, then stuffed it into a larger trash bag and tied it twice. I carried it to the front of the house and left it near the bins for pickup. I told myself the truck would take it, and that would be the end. That night, the smell still floated in my memory, and the dark, damp soil kept returning to my mind. Some things are buried so they can find you first. I did not like thinking that, so I tried to stay busy. I ate, showered, checked the locks, and walked the house, turning off lights. At the sliding glass door that faces the backyard, I noticed the curtain shifting slightly. Nothing was open. The air inside was still. I lifted the curtain and looked out. An old woman stood near the wall in the deepest shadow of the corner I had been cleaning. She was very thin, her back bowed forward, her gray hair knotted into uneven clumps. The streetlight outside barely reached that spot, but it reached her eyes. They were pale and fixed on me. She did not blink. My hand went to the switch for the backyard light. I clicked it on. The yard flooded with light, and she vanished. She did not step away or duck behind the wall. She did not run. She simply was not there anymore. I stared at the empty corner until my eyes hurt, waiting for my brain to correct what it had seen. Nothing changed. The wall stood clean and silent. The gate stayed locked. A locked gate only keeps out people who use doors, I thought, and the thought made my stomach tighten. I let the curtain fall and backed away from the glass. I did not go outside. I stood in the kitchen listening for the gate to rattle, for footsteps, for any proof that I had imagined her. The house gave me only silence. When I finally lay down, a pressure headache bloomed behind my forehead, deep and steady, like a thumb pushing from inside my skull. Sleep came in fragments. Near dawn, I woke to a slow sound outside, like a shoe dragging through dry leaves, then stopping the moment I sat up. Morning did not fix anything. I stood up and the room tipped, forcing me to catch the dresser. My muscles felt heavy, as if I had worked a second shift in my sleep. I had no fever, no cough, nothing that made sense, just a cold weight in my body and a headache that refused to fade. Before work, I looked out the back door. The yard was empty, but the leaves on the ground were no longer where I had left them. A narrow strip of bare cement cut through the scatter, like someone had walked through and pushed them aside. I told myself it was wind. Wind does not make a path that's straight. At the front of the house, the trash bag with the buried bundle was still there. The pickup had not come. I considered dragging it farther from my door, then stopped. The idea of touching it again made my skin crawl. I stood there long enough to notice something else. The bag was not exactly where I had set it, only a few inches off, but enough that my mind began inventing reasons. A stray dog, a kid, the breeze. I did not see paw prints or shoe marks. I saw only a few grains of dark, damp soil on the concrete near the bottom of the bag, like a smear left by wet fingers. At the warehouse, the lights were harsh, and the air smelled of cardboard and oil. I tried to work like normal, but my hand shook when I scanned labels. I dropped a clipboard. The headache pulsed with the machinery. I kept swallowing as if I could clear the taste of that smell from my throat, and every swallow reminded me that my appetite was gone. Don Esteban pulled me aside around mid-morning. He has worked there forever. The kind of man who notices changes because he has seen every kind of exhaustion. He looked at my face and asked what was happening. I said I had not slept. His eyes stayed on mine longer than polite, as if waiting for me to admit something I did not want to say. That was when I heard about Valeria. She should have been on my line, but her station was empty. Someone said she had not shown up for days. No message, no excuse. Another coworker, lowering his voice, said she had been telling people the lead spot should be hers, that I was only in the way. The words felt like a cold slap because they matched the shape of what was happening to me. Jealousy does not need a knife. It only needs your name. I tried to focus on work, but the day kept slipping. When I bent to lift a box, a wave of dizziness rolled through me and my vision narrowed. I pretended to tie my boot until it passed. The fear was not that I would faint. The fear was that the weakness felt designed, measured, as if someone had decided exactly how much of me to remove each day. After work, I went home and kept my distance from the back door, then gave in and checked anyway. No old woman, no movement. The yard looked normal except for that disturbed line in the leaves. The absence of a threat did not calm me. It made me feel watched from somewhere I could not see. That evening I tried to solve it with ordinary actions. I ate soup, took vitamins I had forgotten in the cabinet, and drank water until my stomach felt stretched. None of it changed the cold in my back. When I sat on the couch, I noticed my hands trembling even when I was still. I held a cup in both hands and watched the surface of the water ripple from my own shaking. At night the footsteps returned. Slow, heavy steps that pressed into leaves paused, then shifted as if someone stood outside the glass door and turned their head toward the house. I stayed in bed, sweating despite the cold, staring at the ceiling until the steps stopped. I got up once to check the lock on the sliding door, then hated myself for checking because it felt like answering a knock. The next day my phone started acting strange. Calls dropped. The speaker crackled with a faint hiss that sounded like breath through a narrow gap. When I texted a friend, the message showed as sent and then disappeared from the screen. I blamed the signal. Then I remembered how cleanly the old woman had vanished when the light came on, and I wondered if the same invisible hand could reach into something as small as a screen. Over the next 2 days the exhaustion deepened. My appetite disappeared entirely. The cold settled in my back, as if my spine was a place for winter to live. At work, I leaned on shelves when nobody was looking. I started making small mistakes, the kind that pile up until someone notices. It felt like my body was being drained in quiet increments. A curse is not loud, it is patient. On the third night I woke because the mattress dipped. Not a sudden drop, a careful sink, like someone sitting down slowly, trying not to wake me. I opened my eyes and the lamp I left on filled the room with weak light. The old woman was sitting on the edge of my bed. Her face was close enough that I could see deep folds around her mouth, and the gray cast of her skin. Her hair hung in damp strings, the same thick, stale odor from the bag pressed into the room. Wet earth and trapped air. My lungs tightened, and then I realized I could not move. Not my arms, not my legs, Not even my tongue. I was awake and trapped in my own body. She leaned forward slightly. Her eyes were dark, glossy, and empty of emotion. She did not threaten me. She did not snarl. She simply looked, as if checking the level of something inside me. I tried to force a sound out of my throat. Nothing came. The effort made my chest ache. When the body weakens, the house becomes a hallway. I understood that then. My bedroom was no longer mine. It was a stop on her route. The mattress pressed down a little more. Then the pressure lifted all at once. The room felt a degree warmer. My fingers twitched. I sucked in a huge breath and sat up, shaking. She was gone. The door was still locked. The window was still closed. The quiet after her presence felt like an insult. At work the next day, Don Esteban saw my hands tremble and said, very quietly, that this was not ordinary illness. He told me there are people who can do a groundwork, a trebuchet, to make someone lose strength little by little until they cannot keep a job. He asked if I had found anything buried. I did not want to say yes. I did anyway. He nodded as if he had expected it. He said he knew a woman who checks these things, Dua Isabella, and that if I waited longer, the work would finish tightening around me. He offered to take me after the shift. Pride tried to speak. Fear spoke louder. I agreed. Dua Isabella lived on the edge of town in a plain house with a wide patio. No signs, no show. Wind chimes clicked softly. When the breeze moved, she opened the door before we knocked, as if she had been waiting. She did not ask me if I believed. She asked what I touched. I told her about the damp soil, the small bag, the smell, the hair, the cloth, the red ribbon. I told her about the old woman in my yard and how she vanished when the light turned on. I told her about the headaches, the cold, the footsteps, and the night she sat on my bed while my body refused to move. Saying it out loud made it sound unreal, and I hated that feeling, like my own mouth could betray me by turning fear into a story. Dua Isabella listened without interruption. When I finished, she took my hand, turned it over, and studied the creases like they were a map. Then she sniffed once, quick and exact. You still carry it, she said. Not only on your skin, in your body, she explained in a calm voice that made it harder to dismiss. If someone plants a work in your ground and you open it, you become part of it. The goal is not to kill you fast. The goal is to empty you so you fail slowly, so it looks like your own weakness. They want you tired, she said. They want you to quit. They want your place. Her tone was almost gentle, but the message was brutal. I mentioned Valeria, how she had been hungry for my spot, and how she vanished right when I started getting sick. Dua Isabella asked if she knew where I lived. I admitted she had driven me home once, when my car was in the shop. Dua Isabella nodded once, like a decision sealing shut. Then she had a map, she said, and she had time. She said she would come to my house that afternoon, and told me not to dig anywhere else. If there is one bag, she said, there is often another near water. That is how they keep it alive. She also told me not to pray out loud in panic, not because prayer is bad, but because panic is loud. The moment you name it with fear, she said, you answer it. She arrived with a bucket, coarse salt, and a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. She walked straight to my backyard, stopping at the corner where I had dug. She pressed her fingertips into the soil and lifted them. The dirt clung in a way it should not have if it were old and dry. Recent, she said, placed for you to find. She followed the base of the wall slowly, scanning the ground as if reading faint handwriting. Near the drain where rainwater runs off. She paused and pointed at a slightly raised patch. She used a metal spoon, scraping carefully. Plastic appeared after a few strokes. She hooked it and lifted a second bag, smaller than the first and swollen with moisture, tied with black thread. The knot was tight, practiced. My mouth went dry. The smell around that bag carried the same stale weight as the first, mixed with something waxy. Dua Isabella placed the second bag into the bucket without opening it, then asked me to bring the larger trash bag from the front. I retrieved it, careful not to press it against my clothes. She placed both bags in the bucket, poured salt over them, then opened the smaller wet one low so its contents fell straight down. Wet soil spilled out, dark and clumped. Pieces of black candle wax followed, smeared and broken. Then a photo slid into view, my employee badge photo. My face staring up from the dirt. A crumpled paper came next, stained brown. My name was written there in block letters, Mateo Rivas. Under it, A line of cramped writing that looked like a rushed request. The ink swollen by dampness. I did not need to read every word to understand the intent. My legs softened. Hair could be anyone, this could not. This was a message with my face on it. This is to weaken you, she said, to make you lose your place. This is envy with a plan. I asked how someone could get into my yard without me hearing. She answered without drama. Old hands move quiet. They come early. They come when you are at work. They do not need to fight your locks if they know your habits. She tapped the wall lightly with her knuckle. Concrete does not matter if the person inside never looks down. I asked about the old woman. Dua, Isabella said, the worker. Who sets these is often older. Someone who knows the steps and the timing. Sometimes you see the worker. Sometimes you see what follows the worker. Either way, what matters is that the presence is part of the method. It frightens you. It pushes your body deeper into weakness. It also makes you isolate, and isolation is another kind of rope. She told me the reasons behind the objects, not like a sermon, but like instructions. Hair or cloth creates a link. The red ribbon binds, the color used to tie in clothes. The corner of a yard is a place where attention fails, where dirt collects, where energy gets trapped. A second burial near water keeps the soil wet so the work stays active. Dry ground seals, she said. Wet ground keeps breathing. Then she mentioned a story some families tell. La Vieja del Patio, the old woman of the yard. A warning for children to stay away from walls at night. That story did not come from nowhere, she said. People see a figure because someone has been there. She looked at me with a seriousness that felt like a warning sign. You were not chosen by a spirit. You were chosen by a person. The sentence made anger flare in me, then fade into something uglier. I wanted to drive straight to work and demand answers. I wanted proof. A confession. Anything that would let me put a name on the nights I could not breathe, but I also felt the quiet shame of knowing I had opened the first door myself. She crushed the herbs in her palm and dropped them into the bucket. The sharp scent cut through the stale odor. She sealed the bucket with a lid and tied it down as if the contents might push back. Watching her hands work was the first time in days I felt something close to control return to my chest. Before leaving, she checked the base of the wall and the edges where weeds hide. She found nothing else. That should have calmed me. Instead, it made me wonder how many times someone had been in my yard without me knowing. She carried the bucket to her car and said she would dispose of it far from my house. She warned me that when a work is cut, it can snap back once, like a rope recoiling. If you see her again, she said, do not chase, do not speak, do not open the door for your own fear. You do not win by proving you are brave. You win by refusing to play. That night the pressure in my forehead loosened for the first time in days. I ate a small meal and felt warmth spread in my stomach like something returning. I slept, not deeply, but longer than before. I woke to a tapping against the glass door, soft, patient taps. Spaced out like a person knocking on a neighbor's window. I walked to the kitchen and stood a step away from the curtain. I could feel my heart in my throat. I reached for the backyard light switch and stopped, forcing myself to look through the fabric first. A figure stood in the far corner by the wall, where the light from the street dies. I could not see her face, only the outline of a thin back and a bowed head. She was still, as if she had been set there to be noticed. I turned on the backyard light. The corner lit up clean and empty. The tapping stopped. The yard looked ordinary, and that ordinariness felt like a lie. I kept the light on until morning and did not step outside. The following days were the slow return of small things. My hands steadied. The cold eased off my back. Hunger came back in short waves. The headaches faded into something I could ignore. It felt less like healing and more like being given back what had been taken. At work, Don Esteban watched me carry a full load without swaying and nodded once, satisfied. He did not ask for details. He did not need them. He only told me to keep an eye on my ground, because someone willing to bury a work once might try again if they think it failed. A corner remembers, he said, and the line stayed with me. A week later, the manager announced that Valeria Cruz had resigned without notice. No paperwork, no goodbye. People whispered that she had seemed nervous in the days before she disappeared, like someone expecting a knock at her own door. I listened, and felt no victory, only a hard confirmation that an ordinary human motive had been behind the worst nights of my life. Even when my body recovered, my habits did not. I checked the yard every few days, reading the soil the way Dua Isabella had taught me. Dry looks different from recently turned. A patch that was tamped down wrong has a different sheen. The nose knows before the eyes. I kept the backyard light switch within reach, not as comfort, but as a boundary I could control. One Saturday morning, weeks later, I was sweeping the front walkway when I noticed something at the base of my steel gate. A thin red ribbon lay there, half tucked into dust, bright as fresh thread. Beside it was a single long black hair, damp at the tip as if it had been in night air. My throat tightened. I told myself it could have blown in from the street. I told myself the neighborhood is full of people with long hair. The explanations were familiar, and that was what scared me. They were the same weak excuses I had used when the first bag came up from my soil. The wind shifted, and a faint odor reached me. Stale, heavy, wet earth, the smell of something sealed and kept. I did what I had avoided doing for weeks. I called Dua Isabella. She answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting for that exact moment. I described the ribbon and the hair. She did not ask questions. She only said, "Do not touch it. Do not throw it away yourself. Leave it where it is until I tell you." Then she added, "If it feels like a test, it is." I backed into the house and locked the door. My hands were steady. My heart was not. I stood in the kitchen staring down the hallway as if a thin gray figure might step into view. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. A woman's voice spoke low and close, with no greeting, no name. "The corner is never empty," she said. "It only waits." The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand until the screen went black, listening to the silence that followed. I did not call the number back. I did not lift the backyard curtain. I turned on the backyard light from inside the house and left it on, refusing to give the darkness my face. If you think this is only superstition, fine. Just remember this: if you smell damp soil where everything should be dry, do not dig. If you find a bag tied too tight to be trash, do not open it. And if you ever see an old woman standing by your wall, do not assume the gate is what keeps her out.